Welcome back, everybody. It's your time to ed up on the Ed Up Experience podcast, where we make education your business. So, this is your special guest host. I'm Dr. Lori Shanderson, and I'm the host of Ed Up Accreditation. And I'm taking some time off today to speak to Matthew Merino, the CEO of EMS, which is Education Management Solutions. So, welcome, Matt.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be with you today.
So, I'm late to the game relative to learning about EMS, but I will tell you, as a faculty member, program director, assistant dean, associate dean, founding dean, chancellor, all of health related programs, what you do is so incredibly important to training individuals in the healthcare space. So, can you tell us a little bit about EMS and what you actually do?
Yes, certainly. So EMS has been the pioneer in software solutions in healthcare education and training, and our roots go back to 1994. We introduced the first automated skills assessment solution all the way back in 1997. Uh, and in the past 6 years, we have rapidly evolved into a solutions platform, and our focus right now is about offering the most configurable and comprehensive solutions platform for healthcare education and training, not only for higher education, but also for healthcare providers. And also, we work with the government in many ways too, in their areas in the healthcare arena. Our focus really is how do we uh, build a platform that is flexible and configurable so that our partner institutions can really build what solution works best for them. And what I mean by that, uh, brands of high fidelity mannequins, other types of task trainers, other training tools, integrated LMSs. Our goal is to allow them to create this platform where we can bring all those things in and integrate them into our system. So we're not a believer in the one size fits all approach. We're agnostic when it comes to these other task trainers, hardware devices that can be used in simulation and competency-based education. So that's who we are as a company. And like any other technology company, the world's changing
Right.
almost on a weekly basis. So I feel like we do at times as well.
So Matt, so just to break it down for me, because you said a lot. First you mentioned automated skills assessment. So back in 1994 and 1997, it seems like you rolled it out. What do you mean by that? Were you testing online?
So taking the paperwork out of things as much where we had people that were, you've seen skills checklists before, where it was a checklist that says, all right, I've got to write out this checklist and then I'm going to basically use paper and pen and I'm going to evaluate it that way. It was an actual platform that could be done through a computer where you could store and upload it so that it was a way to centralize it and take the old pen and paper out of it. And in 1990, nowadays we would look at that and say, well, that happens everywhere. But back then, that was kind of a newer concept. So that's
Mhm.
where it started. Um, Quickly evolved into simulation solutions. And what I mean by simulation, it's really the software solution where we could build environments to mimic what a doctor or a nurse would experience once they were actually in that care setting. So um, building out things that were basically patient rooms with cameras and mannequins and paging and the ability to capture all those activities and evaluate individuals, record it, debrief it, create those bookmarks so that instructors could go back and really dig deep in helping those learners understand the very specific areas and those key points to focus on.
Now, do you do this is there a video? So if a student is in, a practice setting room and there's
Mm-hmm.
a high fidelity mannequin and
Yep.
there are other things that are being programmed, running in the background, to happen to the mannequin so that the
Yep.
student can react. So what you do is you take all of that data and then you provide like a comprehensive report relative to the student's performance.
Correct. So it's as advanced as all of those things that go on with the mannequin, and then we're bringing into our system basically the mannequin feed of what happened with the mannequins.
Okay.
We're bringing in the video recordings that we do into the system, and we're marrying all that up. We're bringing in all the audio of every discussion that happened and every conversation, and we're bringing it into one place. All of that centralized. It can be evaluated, and then it allows for a debrief session post these training events, where a student or groups of students or groups of healthcare providers can review what they just went through in that simulation of what went well, what were the opportunities. And it creates, creates an environment, and this is why I'm so passionate about simulation. It creates an environment where it is safe to make a mistake. And I think that's so important. When you think about how high stakes healthcare is, once we're with actual patients, simulation gives us not only an environment that is safe to learn in and safe to make mistakes in, but it also gives us the other, what I believe is the most important thing when we're a learner or anything we want to do. I'll give you an example. Late in life, I tried to pick up playing guitar. And what I learned very quickly is that it takes a lot of hours and hours and hours of doing the same thing over and over and over to get really, really skilled at it. So I think of simulation education the same way, is we're giving people time with the material, to the repetitions and the reps of being able to practice essential skills over and over and over. And that's how we build not only better learners, but eventually better clinicians. And it leads to better outcomes in healthcare long term, which is something that globally impacts every one of us.
Well, tell me how this facilitates um, a better experience for the student relative to an environment where they can make mistakes. Because, oftentimes the experiential learning piece appeared to be very punitive and not more practice based, right? The idea is practice. Didactically, we're going to teach you all the skills and the theory, and here's now where you're going to learn to apply the actual skills. And there's a lot of anxiety for students behind, demonstrating the application of those skills. So how do you alleviate that with EMS?
Well, I believe what ends up happening, and you're exactly correct, is that when it's the very first time, uh, say, a nursing student's in a simulated environment where they are, even though it's simulated, it feels pretty real when you're in there and you're in that room. Um, there's going to be that initial anxiety, but I think what alleviates it down some is that, all right, if I make a mistake with this patient, this isn't a real person who's going to die on the bed. This is a chance, and we can pause the simulation and say, hold on a second, let's think about it. What should we potentially, what are some of our options here? So I think it provides, I'm someone, and I don't know, this will probably be a contrarian view. I think anxiety, a certain amount, is actually a good thing.
Right.
I think it shows that you care about what you're doing, and it adds a level of focus.
I,
So in this environment, we want to make it so that there is still simulation. There's enough realness to it that you still get some of that anxiety, but not the levels that if it was an actual patient or person that it's going to cripple you, and underpin your performance. So I always think of it as, in healthcare education, I always think of it as an evolution. So this is the middle phase. Simulation's that middle phase before we get to the actual hands-on care of patients and learning in that hands-on clinical environment. And in a lot of cases, we've experienced times recently with the pandemic and everything else where that hands-on environment was gone, but it didn't mean we still needed more nurses. We still needed more doctors. We still needed more. Simulation was a way to bridge that gap during that time so that we weren't in even a more difficult position than we already had found ourselves in.
This, and to your point about the pandemic and real world application, to me, is because healthcare is so dynamic and things change all the time. And that was a perfect example of how we had to change and adjust and modify what we were doing. And I think that using EMS, and I'm not sure what you actually call it, the actual.
So the platform is, we call it EMS as the company. Our platform is just the EMS platform. It's composed
Okay.
of multiple components. So we have Our simulation foundation, which was simulation IQ. We have our competency module for competency education and healthcare, which has been a topic of massive discussion over the past 4 or 5 years. That is competency AI, that is really designed to truly measure competency. And we can talk about what that really means, because I think that's a word that is got a lot of squishy definition out there. People sometimes equate competency as I can do a skill, but that's certainly not what it really is. So our platform was simulation based from the beginning. It always will be, but we've added in competency and some other tools to build around it.
You know what I was going to say is that I think that it is so important outside of the classroom as well, because healthcare is dynamic, things change all the time. So wouldn't it be awesome to have a hospital or another type of health system be able to introduce a new technology where they have practical application? They're not sitting in a classroom learning about this and then they have to implement it, but they have hands-on and they can see how it would impact, what they do on a daily basis. So I can see why the government and other institutions outside of higher ed would be particularly interested.
We're incredibly excited and it's fair to say the activities and the partnerships were on the government side and in the provider space for us, rapidly growing areas. And I think it's being driven by a couple things. You're right, healthcare changes rapidly. The technologies in healthcare now are accelerating at such a rapid rate that how do you get people the ability to keep up with it so that we can produce those best possible outcomes? I would say the other thing that is really important right now is that we don't have enough healthcare professionals. It's just a fact. We don't have enough. And as much as we would all love to snap our fingers and create another 30,000 nurses or 5,000 doctors, it's not something that happens overnight. It's an intensive, long-term thing. So we look at it as, can these technologies help not only, I don't want to call re-educate, but continually maintain that level of knowledge for existing professionals? But can we also shorten the window from the time someone leaves their academic environment until they can be treating patients in that hands-on environment? Can we shrink that onboarding so that, I'll give you a crazy stat, and this is a true stat. So one of our people we work with, it's a hospital system that has 32 different nursing specialties. And on average, from the time they hire a brand new nurse until that nurse is on their own handling their own patient load, depending on specialty area, it goes anywhere from 22 to 38 weeks.
Wow.
That's a long time. And not only is that nurse, are you trying to get them to a place where you can do that so that they can handle their own patients, but during that time, it's also taking a preceptor's time out, someone to help them in that onboarding process as well. So a lot of what we're doing in the healthcare provider space, it is still education, but it's a different type of education, because just like in academia, in the provider space, although you see a lot of large concepts and what they're doing daily is very similar, how they do it has uniqueness to it. So being able to provide technology that can accommodate that uniqueness, our goal is to make it, how can we shorten that time? How can, once someone has demonstrated those skills, how can we give the providers, how do we give academia a way to constantly monitor the progress of their
Yeah.
people?
And the progress and the trends as well, right? I mean, how do you keep up with the advancements in the field? Particularly healthcare education. How do you keep up with all the changes, and then how do you incorporate that into the platform?
I would say it's one of the most important and the biggest challenges we face, because we have to be very deliberate about it. It's fair to say that the rate of evolution of the technology is moving at exponentially faster than the adoption, which
Mm-hmm.
moves exponentially faster than the understanding. So here's how we view it. We think of it this way, and it doesn't matter whether we're talking academia or the providers or the government clients. We think of it in a perspective of, we evaluate what technologies do we think can enhance what we're doing already? What are those? Number two, we look at it as how can we make the integration into our system as seamless as possible so that the change experienced is nullified or at least reduced. And the third one is the most important one for us. The challenge with evolving technologies is the complexities, right? The more it's evolving right now, the more complex it gets. But how do we make it so that the end user doesn't have to be a technology expert to be able to utilize the technology? That's one of our biggest focus areas. And we've seen this in the consumer products world forever when you think about cell phones and tablets, of how, although the technologies had advanced and the capabilities had advanced, the usability and making those interfaces, I have young kids, and I'm not ashamed to say it, but my third grader is significantly more skilled on a tablet than I am. But when we think about what we're building, we're saying, how can we make it so that's possible? A good story. So we just released in January what is the first 100% truly mobile, doesn't require any setup, simulation, and training mobile portable solution. So basically, it comes in a suitcase, and in 4 minutes from the time you receive it to open it up, you can set up the entire thing, and anyone can be recording and conducting simulation and training anywhere in the world instantly. I told the team when we were going through development, because I do have a bunch of really smart people, smarter than me, that develop these things and work on these things. And I said to the team, I said, listen, when we're doing this, we've got to give it the CEO test. And I didn't want to use the word dummy test, but CEO test, because I'm not a technologist by trade. It's got to be something that within 5 minutes, I can set it up. Mm-hmm. That was, and it seemed, everyone laughed, but I meant it, because I think that if we're ever going to harness the full capabilities and realize the full potential of new technologies, it's got to be as user-friendly and as simplified as possible so that it doesn't take a massive level of knowledge, of underlying baseline knowledge and technology to be able to utilize it.
I agree with you, because if the technology is difficult, then people won't use it, or they won't go to it first, and they'll go to what they used to do because it's easier to do something you've done over and over again. So I think it's important to incorporate and to consider usability when you introduce new technology, and especially for people my age who look for a 20-year-old when I'm trying to do anything on my telephone. So, and that's the change in technology.
And there are so many people in the world of higher education and whatnot that they are so knowledgeable about what they do. And for a while, I think everyone thought perhaps the robots were going to take over with artificial intelligence and everything like that. And that's not the case, at least not anytime soon. That said, how can we take these technologies as a way to give these experts, the educators, the healthcare practitioners, more time to focus on what they're there to do? The technology is not about replacing. It's about giving people tools that makes their time more effective. Absolutely. And makes it so they can focus on what they do better than anyone else.
Yeah, they would totally appreciate using something like AI or any type of innovative technology to enhance those repetitive types of tasks, and then to be able to devote this critical learning, this analytical cultivation of critical thinking. They would love to be able to have more time to do those things. And I love that you're able to help provide that. I'm curious to know, though, Matt, which types of programs utilize the platform more than others? You have to see some type of spike in, maybe it's this discipline or that discipline. What do you see?
It's fair. So our roots originally were in medical schools, and that is still a large portion of our client base, our medical schools. Nursing schools make up another huge usage. So those two groups in higher education by far are the largest. But that said, we're now seeing the therapies. We're starting to see even allied health programs now, pharmacy. All of those now are starting to move into this simulated platform world as well. In the provider space, it's anybody, right? Anybody who who interacts with the patient. And I would argue in a healthcare system, that's everybody. No matter what your job is, there is something there where you're going to interact either with a patient or a patient's loved one. That's a really broad application. And on the government side, it's probably even a broader set because we have, things such as VA hospitals. We have my background prior to working in the private sector. I was in the military for years, and that's a big piece of what we have to understand also is how are we going to provide health care, safety, emergency care where we are when the resources may not be the same. So those are applications for it. But by far, our biggest sect is higher education with the medical schools and the nursing schools. But it's broadening every year. And we're seeing clients, we're seeing things such as to give you an example, we now have police and fire departments looking at our new mobile solution because what we do is really healthcare based. But when you think about what really goes into healthcare and emergency care services, that's a pretty broad set of folks. So as we have the opportunity now to service emergency response groups and things like that, that's a really exciting newer area for us.
I mean, I agree. I mean, there's so many opportunities to use this training for all of these roles that require experiential learning. You know, Matt, what do you envision as the next big leap in simulation-based training for healthcare, and how are you all preparing for it?
Oh, what can I say without giving it all away? What I think is going to be the next big step, as I see it, will be the enhanced virtual environments that are built and fully incorporated using mixed reality and AI
Yeah.
is where I think it's going next. And how that happens, it's going to take a little bit more time. As I said earlier, jokingly, the robots have not taken over yet, and they're not going to anytime
Yeah.
soon. It's going to be a while still. But I will say that we think that there are ways to take what has been created in AI and what the advancements that are going on in virtual and mixed reality to really create these learning environments that can be dynamic, that can change along the way, that depending on what I may do as the learner, it may change how my virtual patient reacts. It may change all of those things. I think that's a key. And I think there is an application that's on the other side. If we flip the equation, as I said, we're never going to have an instructor that is fully automated and artificial,
Right.
but the data collection that could be done by an AI observing an actual simulation, all the things that it can pick up on, I think will only enhance our data. And then it's taking that data long term. And how do we take the data and make it actionable? I think that there's many organizations we work with, deal with, and talk to who are data rich, but actionably repressed in that they have so much data, but that's not always a good thing. What is the most important and how do we organize it and leverage it? So I think it is a play of those new technologies coupled with taking all these data sets we're getting, which are big data, and how do we figure out what's the most important and organize it to make it actionable to improve the outcome?
So when I imagine what you are envisioning, I see my using the virtual reality goggles, and I'm looking and I'm in a practice setting now, and based on my skill level or where I need some remediation, the scenario will prompt itself to do things, and I'll be able to react, and the data is being collected. This is amazing work.
It is, it is, it is. And we're so excited about it. We understand, though, that it's not going to be an overnight thing. I mentioned earlier, right? The technologies are there. We're figuring out, okay, how do we integrate them to make them? And then how do we get adoption through usability? The one thing I most want to do, if I could wave a magic wand today for simulation and say, here's what I can do, I'd love to make it so that we could make scenarios where an instructor overseeing a scenario could simply type a prompt and make the whole scenario change at any time so that it didn't have to all be built out beforehand.
I
because that's not the world, right?
You
Maybe
could
you
like
want to add
throw in a monkey wrench, so to speak,
exactly,
to shift focus. Yeah.
exactly. I think that's where uh, we want to get to. And I think that's what's needed because, you know, the one thing that's true, whether you're a healthcare professional, an emergency responder, if you're a member of the government working in the military, if there's one predictable thing, it's unpredictableness is going to
Right.
occur in every situation.
Mhm. I totally agree with that. You know, and so how do you measure the success in improving education and training outcomes? How do you collect that data and how do you use it to help you inform the new initiatives that you
And
have?
so a lot of what we do right now is we're going to collect data and we don't share our partners' data with anyone, but it's nice being able to see some of those best practices. And one of the things that we facilitate is we are always not only uh, working with our clients to say, hey, what are your challenges that you're looking to solve? Don't tell me, you know what, uh, not just about my offering to you, but tell me what are the bigger challenges you're trying to solve. And then what we get to see is we get to see data from hundreds of clients across the world of how they're utilizing simulation and what are those best practices. And then multiple times a year, we bring groups of our clients together and we have one big annual summit. And it's great just to sit and listen to them talk back and forth. And how do I measure what we're doing? I measure it by how effective and how complementary is our offering and improving not only the usage, but also the outcomes of the healthcare education students and practitioners. I look at it as it's very easy to measure in the provider space. Are we allowing them to more rapidly onboard their new clinicians? Are we giving them tools that allow them to maintain a clinical standard because of these technologies and this data so that they have a much better view across their entire systems of what their capabilities are? And in the end, how we should measure it. Anything we do in healthcare should be measured by patient outcomes. And
Agreed.
we're not there yet, but that's where we've got to get to a world. And there are metrics, and there have been a lot of drives for that. And I applaud what the healthcare industry has done to move more towards that value care positioning. In the end, everything we do should lead to better students, which leads to better practitioners, which will lead to better outcomes for patients. And if we do that, which is a big, right, it's a big quest. But if we can move the needle just a little bit, that's enough to make a huge difference.
I totally agree, and I loved hearing that from you because you know I wanted to ask about your leadership philosophy, you know, and when it comes to driving innovation and managing a technology-driven company like EMS, you know, I'm just curious to know if you can share some insights from your career journey that influence your approach to leading EMS and advancing healthcare education through technology.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's fair to say that when I was younger, I never thought I would find myself a CEO of a technology company. It wasn't on my bingo card back when I was 22. That said, the philosophy that I always run with, and I've been very blessed in my journey to work with and work for some incredible leaders. And if there's some things that I've learned, number one, uh, having a vision you can communicate is essential. So, what is that vision? And it's got to be a shared vision, not just what do I think. Bringing together a group of people, and I look at our a company as a community. How do we bring that community together so that we can get a vision that we all share of what our opportunity is? So that's step one that I think is the most important thing I can do is to get that on the road and keep that vision in the front of everyone's mind. I think the second piece, and this was to me, it's what I consider my superpower, um, and that is the ability to admit to myself where my gaps are and finding experts to surround myself with in the organization that complement me. And I have such a diverse and skilled group on this journey with me at EMS. Finding the right people to take the ride with you, so critical. Uh, and the last piece is this, like it's uh, we are people that believe in setting almost like a waypoint, like if you're on a map, like I got to get to a certain point, but I don't think we ever look at it as we're finished. So there's
Right.
no goal that we have out there that says once we're here, we've made it. Um, but taking that bigger vision and how do we break it down into very specific, measurable, actionable outcomes and steps that we gain as an organization. So those are the big ones. And the last one that I'm still focused on, it's important, is an environment that where people feel that what they're doing has impact. I think a lot of times I hear leaders talk a lot of times, are your employees happy? Are they happy? Well, happiness is important, but happiness, the biggest contributor is purpose.
Yes.
So is the purpose, do the people that are with me at EMS, do they feel the purpose behind what we're doing? And as a leader, I think that's our job, to be able to connect the dots for everyone. No matter what your role is in an organization, a leader has to be able to articulate and show to each individual person how they contribute to the bigger goal, the greater outcome. That's how you create great teams. And I've never seen a great leader or a really skilled leader with a mediocre team obtain incredible success. Usually it takes a great team. In fact, I think it's a prerequisite, is a great team if you're going to accomplish the really big things. And a lot of what we're striving to do, the really big things.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, your philosophy, I think if I were on your team, I'd feel motivated and energized and invigorated, because your team really has to be sharp and they have to be up on technology and they have to be creative and they have to be innovative. I'm using that word again. But in order to fulfill everything that you're doing and then to just keep a current mindset, you have got to have the best of the best that believe in the vision and where you're taking the organization, and to your point, to have the same values and beliefs and the same North Star guide point.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And it's challenging, right? You've been in many leadership roles too. It's challenging because we get hit with the outside distractions when you're a leader as well. That, can you speak to this group? Can you attend this meeting? Can you go to this conference? And those are all important activities. But I think it takes a real discipline to say, we always like to say, let's make sure the main thing's always the main thing.
Mm-hmm.
So we talk about it all the time. Let's make sure the main thing's the main thing, because there are going to be distractions along the way. But how do we make sure that vision, that shared vision we've created, every activity we take, every step we do, every action we do should relate right back to that? And if not, it's probably something we shouldn't be spending our time on.
Matt, this has been such a really interesting conversation for me. I love hosting a podcast where I learn something new. And I don't know why I say that, because I learn something new each one I have. But taking a step away from accreditation and learning more about technology and simulation, relative to my entire career in healthcare is awesome. I remember the days when we went from um, the low fidelity dummies,
Mm-hmm.
mannequins, and they started to show videos, if I'm not mistaken, and you could like travel through a vein. And
Mm-hmm.
watching the videos versus using the cadavers, there was a little bit of um, there was not enough synergy there. But when people were able to embrace technology and students can really see what it would look like inside of a vein and not this discolored cadaver here that's not providing as much value as we think it does. Um, Innovation is just something that we need to embrace in terms of healthcare. Technology is dynamic, healthcare is dynamic. The two merge together, to your point, can only create better health outcomes for everyone. So I applaud you in everything that EMS is doing. And I loved having you speak about everything that you're doing. And I just want to give you the opportunity to maybe share something that I wasn't able to ask or you didn't get to share with us about EMS.
Well, I've really enjoyed this too. And I don't know if I have anything to share about EMS, but I do think it's important for all of us that are committed to this world of healthcare. The one thing that I hinted to in leadership philosophy, but I think it applies to this space as well. There's a real value in humility, because I think the really major challenges we face, there's not one organization that's going to solve it. There's not one company that's going to give you, here's the perfect solution that meets all your needs. I think that we have to embrace those partnerships, and we have to embrace working together on the big issues, because that's how they get solved. And we may be at a time right now where the idea of coming together and finding middle ground, and it may not be as strong as it's been in the past, but I think we have to discover that, especially in the world of healthcare, and embrace that if we're going to, healthcare is one of those few things that we all exit this world the same way, right? The end for all of us is the same, whether we want to talk about it or not. I think we need to all come together to say, okay, how do we make it so that we can push that end out as far as possible, and all those years leading to it are as productive and as fulfilling as possible?
Well, that is a perfect note to end on, humility. And I hope everyone listening, you take that message with you from the wonderful Matt Merino, the CEO of Education Management Solutions. And, you've just all been ed up again, and we appreciate your listening to the podcast. You should check out the EdUp Experience podcast, because there are so many different opportunities for you to learn about anything that's going on in higher ed. There's EdUp Accreditation, where I am your lovely host. There's EdUp Marcom, EdUp Cantonese, EdUp Chinese, EdUp in Espanol, EdUp Title IX. I mean, take your pick. It's all there for you listeners, and we hope that you join us there on the EdUp Experience platform. Again, Matt, thank you so much for joining me today. And
Thanks
I
for
wish you
having me.
a wonderful day.
Hey, thanks so much.